Hello, everyone. Welcome to Film Music Media's Midsummer Music Matinee. My name is Savas, and I am the founder of Film Music Media. I'm excited to speak with these talented composers on their recent projects. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. First up, we have the composer of the animated drama Charlotte. Please welcome Michelino of Bisceglia.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Next up, we have the composer of Apple TV's animation short Blush. Please welcome Joy Ngiaw.
Hi.
Hi, Joy. And next, we have a composer that recently worked on Amazon's The Boys Season 3. Please welcome Matt Bowen.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, we have a composer that recently worked on Nickelodeon's The Loud House movie. Please welcome Philip White.
Hi, everybody.
Philip. So let's just get started. We'll go down the line. This is a question for everybody. So when we're here talking about animation, I love animation. I work at Cartoon Network Studios and in production systems. I work with all our show teams, so I know the process quite well. But I want to hear everyone's perspective on it and how you see it, related to maybe other things you do in your career. So let's start with the question of when you score or songwrite for an animated project, is there anything different in the early stages of your process? Are you scoring to an animatic? Do you wait for that locked picture? I'm curious what everyone's process is and from your project. So Matt, let's start with you. We can start with you.
Yeah, sure. And just to be, I do work on The Boys with Chris Leonards, but I think related to this panel, I think it's brought on because of the work on the Diabolical spinoff, which is the animated portion. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm speaking universally. I can definitely speak from the experience on that project where we started with an animatic, which is very helpful from, a spotting and a timing standpoint. But the challenge there is a lot of times it's missing a lot of information. So one thing that the production team did that was insanely helpful is they just had all this beautiful, beautiful artwork that they also sent over that just really helped establish the world that we'd be living in. From the animatic, it didn't really convey, we worked on 2 episodes, and I co-scored these episodes with Chris Leonards. One of the episodes was it had this incredible grit and grime to it that really wasn't in the animatic, but thankfully when they sent that artwork over, it was like, oh, okay, that's the world we're living in. Great, we can get started.
Absolutely. Philip, how about you? Let's talk about your process and when you work on animation.
Sure. Just to piggyback off what Matt said, something similar that happened with Loud House was, maybe this is different. Certainly was different for me, but I had a huge amount of time to work on it, it happened right at the beginning of the pandemic, and they didn't have it scheduled for another year. So there was a lot of early time of just sort of, time to explore ideas and so forth. But to Matt's point about once the team started sending us just color prints of and they were just stills, but of what the cells would ultimately look like, it really literally the color informed the color of the instrumentation, I think, that I ended up going for. So there was sort of a correlation between the actual color of the cells and the musical color that would ultimately be part of it. But so something cool. So Matt and I also collaborate a lot with Chris Leonards, and
you're the Chris Leonards boys. Yeah. I know Chris White well. I've been to his house and the studio and everything. Yeah, so I know Chris.
Yeah, he's a total mensch. And in our case, he had the idea of pitching to the team of actually writing a song that would be like an emotional linchpin for the whole piece, for the whole movie. And then the underscore would incorporate themes from it, and we would score it, throughout, and then it would ideally have, a big emotional payoff at the end. So we actually started writing a song, and then the underscore was informed from that, which was so helpful, because once you have even just 2 or 3 themes, you can do so much with them. Especially with animation, I think it affords a lot of flexibility in terms of how you arrange different motifs and such. So for us, it was great to be able to start with a song first, and then use that as the building block for the whole underscore.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, it creates, I think, a great anchor point, to build off of. Great foundation for sure. Yeah. So Joy, how about you? What's the early stage process in animation look like for you?
Yeah, I think similar to Philip and Matt, I feel like there's a lot more time in the pre-production where the composers will be brought on early on, seeing the sketches, reading the script, seeing this artwork, seeing the animatics. And it's just so incredible to see the process of it. Every time they send me a cut, it's like, oh, something new is in this cut. And it inspires the music, and it goes so hand in hand together, because they say that the music inspires them when they're animating as well. And I think the process can be different from live action. At the moment, I'm scoring 2 TV shows. One is the animation and one is live action. And the process is different, where I do get brought on really early for the animation to create character themes so they can build up of that. For the live action, it's more like I send them temp music or pre-existing music. So they take that and like edit it into the temp, and then we'll have a conversation from there. Might be different for different productions, but
Sure.
It's interesting to see how when these two parallel together, like, oh, the process is a bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah. Michelino, how about you? What is your process like in early on animation?
Well, it would basically with Charlotte, which was a special kind of film, was more like a biopic of a true story. Had to go a little deeper, try to catch her. Who was she as a person? What was her character? So I had to find kind of a development, a research before any music was on paper. And actually, I was composing quite lots themes and sketches already based on the script, because again, also like Joe was saying, I was pretty early in stage of the production. And then it came this whole pandemic problem we all had to face through. We had to go through that, which gave me a lot of time, more time that was planned ahead. So while the animatic was getting developed, I could try things out on the animatic. It was well, actually, I hadn't that much experience with animation. I'm doing much more live action films, but this film was in all its aspect more like in live action than in animation. The only thing what was in animation was what you were seeing actually in terms of an emotion and in terms of how this story evolved, and also especially how the sound design was developed with the voice of Keira Knightley.
Yeah, sound design is such an underrated part of everything coming together, especially animation when everything has to be created from scratch. It's just absolutely. So there's another question for the whole panel. We'll go around the room again. Do you find that animated projects let you explore different genres of scoring within the same project? I think animation does allow, and from my point of view, it allows to move really quickly and kind of be big and bold and move across different genres. So we'll start with Joy this time. Joy, do you feel like what does animation afford you as a composer in terms of genre?
Well, like you said, I definitely think so. Music plays such an active role in animation, and it can sometimes become the voices of the characters when there's no dialogue. It can act as sound effect or acts as a motor to bring momentum to an action and movement. And because the story worlds and the characters can be so dynamic, there's so much space and creativity involved. It really, I think, allows us, the composers, to explore different genres when scoring and be very creative with our music, which I think is one of the best parts in scoring animation.
Absolutely. Michelino, talk to me about that, about genres and what it can afford you as a composer.
In this case, it was a kind of a drama, so there was.
Yeah, you had a very serious subject matter with this one, so it wasn't. Yes. We're not talking about colorful things, and so.
Yeah, so this was more like, and even more actually. I kind of excluded to go too far with other. I just wanted to say very specific on her throughout the whole film as much as I could, but maybe we will bring that up later on in discussion also. So yeah. But what I felt was that, of course, you have to recreate this whole realistic world as much as possible. So the sound design will be developed. So there's much room, much space for little details, for a lot of refinement. Actually, it was a challenge to have a huge orchestra, but to use it as minimal as possible. That was, it was a great tool to play with, but it was a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. Would you have applied the same kind of things that you did if this was a live action drama compared to animation? Did the fact that this was animated change your approach to the genre at all?
I didn't feel it that much in this in this project, as if I have to be honest. But it was also the kind of the film it was. Like I said, it was like it's like a biopic. So it's a heavy drama, very heavy story.
Yes.
So we all had to feel it. Actually, the producers decided to make an animation, to not make it too heavy, even to imagine how strong it was.
Yeah, I can imagine. So Matt, talk to us about working on The Boys. I mean, that's already you're taking a certain genre and building upon it and kind of making its own thing. And it's, I mean, talk about the whole process and when it shifted to animation.
Diabolical was they brought Chris and I on so that there was some, I think some continuity there. And that said, as soon as we were brought on, they said, we're not looking for regurgitation here. These need to be, we're inspired by The Boys and we want you to be inspired by what you've been doing on The Boys, but these are their own things and they're
right.
And they really are, each episode is a complete standalone direction artistically. And so we worked on 2 different episodes and those 2 scores couldn't have been more different. And then, with regards to kind of the genre hopping that you've mentioned, again, I can only speak from our experience on Diabolical, but it sounds like, these were just 12-minute shorts and they were just a wild ride that you kind of just needed to follow. So I think, listening to Michelino talk about, he has this, I think, broader brushstroke, very dense story, very serious. These were not broad brushstrokes. These were very quick movements, not dark stuff. Well, they were dark, but in a very different way.
Right.
I hear, Philip mentioned they wrote a song and then they could extract from that, which sounds amazing. And it sounds like a really fun process. But on these, there was no time to plant a seed that we could then reference later, because by the time, as a matter of fact, not only were both episodes, the score for both episodes were completely different, but I would say the score within the episodes were completely different as you kind of went linearly. I mean, the first episode alone, we started in Brit punk land, and then it turned to kind of psychedelic rock, and then we had full-on super Americana superhero, and then we had kind of tongue-in-cheek cheesy superhero anthem, and then that took that anthem and it devolved into, we kind of mangled and distorted it. So that's the arc over just one of the episodes. So again, just speaking from the experience on Diabolical, but yeah, the genre hopping was very much there for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Philip, talk to us about Loud House and how did that afford you the ability to kind of jump around?
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like, just from listening to everybody, it's ultimately the story will drive the music.
Sure. Yeah.
And certainly with Loud House, there was some element of taking what the series had done to an extent, but from the very beginning, the producers really wanted to make it seem as sort of big, and they wanted to really make it feel like a movie as much as possible, and not a small screen show. So we started out with some punk elements, which sort of represents the brashiness of the Loud House family. There's I believe there's 11 kids and one boy. All the other kids they're all girls, and they span, they're like from ages 6 months to 18, and Lincoln he's 11, I believe, and he's like right smack in the middle. And the punk sound was just sort of there, just the craziness of the kids, I suppose. But we also had orchestra, And then a big component of the film was them going to Scotland to sort of rediscover their roots. So we incorporated a lot of Celtic elements, dulcimers and fiddle and bagpipes, and just sort of placed here and there, and in combination with orchestra and band elements. There was even one little Lincoln's best friend is a baker, and and he talks about his backstory with his French roots, and so we had like this sort of French adjacent, little like accordion segment, which is just like, the nice thing with animation is that when it's appropriate, you can switch really dramatically very quickly, and the audience will just go with it. You don't really need to explain, which is something that with live action you can do, but I think we as audience members, I think we give animation more permission to just kind of do whatever and go with it. So yeah, it also there was a lot of gear shifting for sure.
Absolutely. So Michelino, I want to jump to you and talk to you about Charlotte. So you composed the soundtrack for Charlotte. It's a tragically beautiful true story, as you mentioned, of Charlotte Solomon, who a young German Jewish painter who flees Berlin on the eve of the Second World War. So what was it like? You kind of mentioned a little bit. What was it like creating the soundtrack for a story that's as emotional as that and that has those true story kind of elements?
Well, I started off by visiting some museums in London and in New York. I wanted to see all her works as much as possible. She was a great artist, very gifted, very young. She had a future. She had a dream. She wanted, like we all have as musicians, we wanted to, make our dream come true. That's what I felt. So, but I wanted I wanted to be close to her work as much as possible. Yeah. So I stayed a couple of hours in those places. Then I bought a book with all her works. It's like 1,000 drawings that she has, more or less 1,000. So I spent some time reading about her, and after that I did quite some Zoom calls, quite a lot actually, with the directors. We had two directors, Eric Guarin and Tahir Rana, to see their view, how they saw it. Also with the producer, which was Julia Rosenberg, sorry. She was really involved in the development of the film, and spent a lot of time to talk to them. I wanted to create a music that personalized her as much as possible, so you could really hear her, feel her, kind of almost touch her, But I needed to know who she was, how much Jews does she felt for herself. She was young, she was kind of naive a little bit. She didn't have much to do with this, her belief, or her background. And then the other background was the Nazi camp, the Second World War, which was just in the beginning of the World War. At the end, I decided to stay with her. I left out all the other elements. In the music, you feel it, it's there, but it's not in the foreground, it's really in the background. But I had to find a way with the makers of the film to follow my choice in a way. And it's, you have, like we all know, you have many ways to go, but you have to choose. Yeah. And I was very happy that they kind of follow me in the beginning. That kind of were maybe a little careful with it. Yeah, are you sure? But that's okay. That's great when there's doubt. That's great when there is where's room to rethink some approaches. And then we went all along, and I'm very happy how it turned out.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So it seems like you really wanted to make the music a musical portrait of her, and kind of design and build from that, make it intimate and personal.
Yeah, for instance, one of the most strongest element in the film, you have this Kristallnacht event in the Second World War, where actually the World War started. This is a scene that has been filmed maybe 1,000 times, and you hear 1,000 times militaries and snares and stuff like that, which is, of course, that's what you're seeing. but you also see Charlotte running in the street. She's very afraid. She's scared. And I left out all the rest and just stayed with her, with just one set cello and built up around her. But that's a big choice to make. And I wanted the directors and the producer to follow this kind of approach. And at the end, I am very happy that they kind of, they went along with my approach. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. That's incredible. Joy, let's jump over to you. You did an amazing job at capturing the essence of grief in the soundtrack for Blush. Is it difficult to capture kind of a personal emotion, that we all relate to? I'm curious, are you thinking of it? I've talked to composers about this a little bit, and it's interesting. I've heard some people like, oh, I'm more like an actor and I'm trying to convey this emotion. Or do you get a little bit more autobiographical, and do you pull from your own experiences? And how do you make sure that that feels organic and true and really kind of resonates with everybody?
Right. I think that was actually the beauty of scoring Blush, is because it's such a personal story to our director. And through this process, it was very therapeutic for all of us, because like you said, grief is something that we all experience. And I think because of that, it really connected the whole crew together. It gave us a purpose to want to strive to honor, the memory of his late wife, and to also explore this emotion that we all feel so universally in many different aspects, because grief is not just about sadness. It also is about remembering those happy moments, is about moving on with love, healing, and hope. So the fun part of it really was to explore, writing music, writing the musical theme in very different variations and showcasing like a wide range of emotions that we experience, in this life. And it also reminds me to think of, like, whenever I'm writing something, think of all the elements with intention. Like, why am I adding this passage here? Like, what purpose does it serve? Like, one of the ideas actually that I had based on all those, wonderful conversations with my director is how our family is like our oxygen. Our loved ones is like our source of life. And because of those conversations, it inspires me to include some vocal elements or breath to kind of, where we place those elements was very intentional. Like, when our loved ones are around us, we have air, but when they leave, it feels like we're losing air. So I think it really served a purpose and helped me come back to the core. Why am I writing this music? What message does the director and wants to, give to the audience, which is healing and hope. So
wow,
it was really fun process.
Yeah, the air aspect that's brilliant. I love that. That's just bringing the air and taking it out. Like, that's
and it's all inspired by the director. So it's so fun, like, to have those conversations. It helps inspire the music.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about the conversation, the collaboration, for sure. So let's jump over to Matt. So Matt, you talked about how every episode of The Boys Diabolical is this kind of standalone story. So can you tell us a bit more about your episode and the work in this kind of unique series?
Yeah, sure. So Chris and I scored 2 episodes, actually, because there were 2 episodes that were kind of most closely tied to the mothership, as we call it, the main Boys series. So there was 2 episodes that were most closely tied in, and so those are the ones that we worked on. That said, as I mentioned, day one, they were like, don't do what you've already done, which was cool. But that said, that material is sitting there in case you need to reference it. So for one of the episodes, we kind of used, it was tricky because one of the central characters, his name is Butcher, and we have a very established sound for him on the main show. And then one of the episodes is very much centered around him. But we needed to give him a different sound. So we kind of needed to actually turn off, okay, we're going to not allow ourselves to use these elements that we use at the main show. We're going to take this a different approach, but it still needed to have his brashness and his swag. So we still needed to accomplish a lot of the same things, but to have it sound sonically different. Which I thought would be a bigger challenge, but once you're responding to the art and the visual in front of you, then it does kind of inform you creatively to take it a different direction. And on the other episode, it actually turned out to be, it's very much canon for the Boys series. The other episode's called 1 + 1 = 2. and it serves as a prequel. It's Homelander, again, one of the main central characters of the main show. It's kind of his origin story. And that one was a wild ride that again, you're following the story, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but a lot of it does kind of write itself as you just kind of let the story in. And then there was a really cool moment. I'm going to not fully describe it because it is at the end of the episode. So if you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it, but there was a really cool moment where we just very overtly use one of our themes from the main show, just very appropriately, I'll just say, and it felt so good because it was a prequel. And so we did it in a very straight, it wasn't like a texture, it wasn't hidden. It was just a solo French horn saying, here is that melody in all its glory. And because if you think about it it being a prequel, that if you were to watch it linearly, then that should exist in its most basic form at that moment. And then as the live action show comes up, then it's a bigger, more resounding version of it. So that was really fun and rewarding to be able to acknowledge the score for the main show. But for the most part, the scores did really kind of live in their own world.
Yeah, and you said each episode was 12 minutes?
I think 12-ish minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So like when at Cartoon Network Studios, like our episodes are, quarter hour, 11 minutes per episode. And that, yeah, you have to really like the beat of the story just keeps moving, and then you just kind of have to follow that over along.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I would kind of mentally say each episode then also, I would say, would broken into 2 acts kind of roughly. Mm-hmm. Creatively, I don't know that that's necessarily our approach, but that's just kind of, they ended up where the score in the first half of one is completely different than the score in the second half. And that happened on both episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go over to Philip. So Philip, you worked on the score and main theme for the Loud House movie based on the theme that Chris Leonard's wrote for the show. Can you walk us through your approach and for the film and
Sure.
what were your favorite, maybe a favorite moment or sequence from the movie that you scored?
Sure. Yeah. So as I said earlier, Chris really advocated for writing a song first that we would then kind of hang everything on, and fortunately the producers were very much on board, especially because they were also creating it as a musical. There were, I think, 6 other songs that we weren't responsible for. They had a separate songwriting team that wrote fantastic songs for it. But we thought, hey, if we can also add one more where we could build the underscore around, it would just sort of help tie everything in a little better. So Chris, I hope I'm not outing him too much, but I think it's actually kind of sweet the way we sort of went back and forth. We literally just traded voice memos. Like, he sent me early on just the voice memo for the main theme, and that's kind of what it was. I then took that and played some guitar under it and sent it back to him, and then he we just kind of went back and forth like that, and that ended up being the chorus of the main song. And then excuse me, I think we each took a stab at lyrics and we ended up combining them. In the end, it's a nice aspect of collaboration when at the end of the project, you're not really sure of like who was responsible for what. It's just sort of a nice blend, and that's sort of how it happened. So once we had the song, and fortunately the production team was, they're very much on board and really liked it. We then just took the themes from the different, from the chorus, from the pre-chorus, from the verse, and I started just plugging them in as it seemed appropriate, which is really, really, really fun. And in terms of a favorite moment, there's one. I'd say the nemesis of the movie is this Scottish innkeeper, this lady named Morag, who she's the innkeeper of this castle where the whole family descends upon, and she really resents them and just wants them out as as quickly as possible. Also for reasons that become clear later, she kind of wants to sort of maintain control of this whole castle and their little town. But there's a moment when everyone's kind of turning on her, and she just has this moment of inner frustration where she just decides to leave, and she takes this, like, I don't know how to describe it, just this like boiling anger journey through, like, the woods, and it's just like, and it's all just music. Like, she's just like, it's just like she's not saying a word, she's just like rowing her boat through this little lake, and she goes underneath this hill, and she travels up to this mountaintop, and then just like lets out this scream. And so the score just like, it was fun to just color that whole journey, cut out right before she screams, and then it's just like, so that was a fun cue to write. There were many, and actually I really enjoyed just combining band elements. We used a lot of drums, bass, guitar, but added some Celtic instruments on top of that, whether it was bagpipes or just I can't remember, dulcimers and things like that. So that was one cue that stood out.
That's awesome, because you get to just kind of go center stage to put music and just let it kind of drive the scene, or follow the scene, how it's driven. But
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So piggybacking on what you were saying, Philip, you're talking about collaboration, how important that was, and I want to kind of go around the room again and ask everyone, collaboration is such an important process, or part of the process for composing, whether you're collaborating with your music team or whether you're collaborating with your filmmakers, fellow filmmakers, your directors, producers. So I'd love to just kind of ask, how important is collaboration when it comes to the composing process for you, and what is your key to success in collaborating, whether it's whether learning how to compromise, or giving ideas, or taking feedback, or giving feedback. So I'm just curious, everyone's process. I know we'll start with Michelino. I know you talked about just working with your directors to get on board with your vision. So I'm curious, maybe how you did that. How did you convince them? Were they apprehensive? This wasn't the right approach? I'm just curious, and maybe anything else in your perspective of collaboration and all that.
Yeah, well, actually, that's something that is very important for me and every film that I'm working on, is that first you have to trust. There needs to be a lot of confidence between the people working on, especially on the small group that you are for the most part of time developing the whole music, to create a kind of a room where you can allow it yourself to just, create something that maybe is completely wrong, but it's okay to do it. You have that ability to have that space, to go to figure out, to find the border still where you can go, even if it's interesting to find something that is completely wrong, because there you have a much bigger play to play with, and and I think it sometimes might be problematic if the space is too narrow, like something in, where your options are so limited. It's interesting. Well, you always have to limit the options, of course, but by start, it's interesting to see how far can you go, the opposite of it. And actually, I do talk like that with the directors. Please give me space. Give me room to experiment with things, with harmonies, melodic developments, orchestration, whatever it can be. And actually I had that with Charlotte a lot, also with this new film that it's not an animation, it's a live action film. And I remember he came over to Belgium. I'm living in Belgium, and we just spent the whole day talking, not about the film, but just talking, how do we work, how much room do we want to have, how much room do we need to work. It was very interesting to have that moment with the director, or with those who are deciding what you're gonna do.
Exactly. No, I think it's so important that, you know, directors trust their composers and have, and what you're saying, that have room to fail, because you're trying things and you have to experiment to see what works and what doesn't. And if it's that pressure that you have to like get approval every single time you submit something for review, that would be so stressful, and you wouldn't be creating. You would just be trying to either follow the temp or whatever, you know, whatever it might be. But, you know, that sounds like you had such a rewarding creative environment though. So that sounds amazing. But Joy, let's jump over to you. What's your experience with your take on collaboration? How important is it for you in your process?
It's so important. I think that's kind of my main inspiration and why I want to be a composer is human connection. I really love connecting with filmmakers or also music team, learning about their stories, inspirations. I truly believe everyone has a unique story and perspective to tell. And I think by connecting with another human being, whether it's your filmmaker, someone from your team, the screenwriters, it feels that it's enriching, not only as a composer, but as a human. And I think with all these human experiences, that's what we bring to the table. That's why we want to do art, and understanding the why, you know, like why are we doing this? It really does serve as such a great backbone to the musical theme. And also, like, so for Blush, we did everything through Zoom during the pandemic. But the first time we all met in person was at the recording session. And that was just surreal. It just reminded us, like, wow, the human connection is just, that's why we're here. It's like to be in the same room with people, to feel, to connect. And that truly brings such a big purpose. And I think it just helps everything. It helps everything that we do as a creative.
Absolutely. I mean, I was doing some panels with the SCL in the past weeks, and I was moderating, you know, creators and composers who had never met in person. And I'm just like, you know, and they're just, you know, we've only worked on Zoom, and I know how that is, because I mean, when the pandemic hit, like animation didn't stop, live action came to a halt, but we were scrambling and sending out, you know, remote recording kits to people's homes. You know, we had adapted and kept going, and but that connection is so important, because when I got into this, why I love film and TV and gaming and all that, it's the exploring the human condition. I think you nailed it right on the head there. Yeah,
such a beautiful reminder, right? Like everyone comes together. The first thing we say is, "You're real." Like we're not seeing each other in a little screen. Like, oh my God, that's what you look like. It's amazing. It's incredible. That's the best part of our job, I think.
Absolutely. Matt, I mean, you know, you work with Chris and you have an amazing team there. So talk about collaboration, how important it is with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. You know, we work in isolation so much. So any any grain of collaboration we can get, we take. You know, I think all composers just really thrive off of that. So I did have the immense luxury of co-scoring with Chris, so that right away was, you know, I wasn't scoring in a vacuum. You know, it was Chris and I. So that was a huge luxury, especially with somebody of Chris's level of experience. But with the team, it was the first time working for both me and Chris, working with the director and producer Simon and Giancarlo. And so, you know, when you said the what's the key to a good collaboration, my immediate thought was, you know, I think the key is you have to be okay with failing. When it's your very first time working with somebody, that can be a little intimidating to accept. But you know, we kind of jumped in feet first on this project, because the very first thing we worked on, because it was pretty early in the process, so I was kind of like, oh, we know this guy's going to need a theme, and here's everything we have, so why don't you just get started on some sketches. And this guy, his name is the Great Wide Wonder. And as you might be able to tell from his name, he's first of all, he's a superhero, but he's a very cheesy one. And there are all these superheroes, and they all kind of, it's like almost like wrestling. They all have their walk-up song. And so there's all the A-list superheroes, and they all have their A-game walk-up song. And then there's this guy he's caught in Butcher's crosshairs in this episode. So he's kind of the focal point. So we needed to write a theme song, a walk-up song for this guy, but it needed to be cheesy. And it's almost like, you know, Vought, which is the enterprise that markets all of their superheroes. It's like Vought has a team of in-house composers. but maybe this guy, they kind of passed this one off to the intern to write his theme song, and so like that's kind of how we were like imagining, like, oh, the intern at the in-house Vought Studios is writing this theme, and so we wrote something, and we were just chuckling, we were just giggling because we loved just how cheesy it was. But writing something cheesy it can be a hard line to walk, because if you don't go cheese enough, then you end up in this valley of ambiguity of like,
Right.
I don't know, it's supposed to, like, you don't know if it's supposed to be cheesy or not. You just know it's not great. And we kind of realized, we're like, wow, this is the first thing we're sending to our new collaborators. I hope that, and so it was kind of, they loved it. And the sketch that we sent them is nearly exactly what you hear in the episode, but with a live orchestra on it. But so that was a fun way to get that relationship started. Is just like, well, we're gonna swing for the fence on this, and we're totally okay if we swing and miss. And that got that party started.
Absolutely. I had two conversations with recently with Henry Jackman and Dom Lewis for Bullet Train and for Gray Man, and they both had similar stories where they're just like, they swing for the fences, and if it fails, then it's better to be able to just come down a little bit rather than keep kind of incrementally going up and trying to find the point. It's like that. And then the Rousseaus would always be like, well, that's a little bit too much. We appreciate the swing, but let's just take it back a little bit. And Dom had a similar experience. So I thought, and it's very much true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's Philip, I want you to finish us off on the topic and talk about collaboration. Again, you're working with Chris, and you have an animation, with a big movie like that, I'm sure a lot of collaboration going on. So
sure. Yeah. Well, piggybacking off of what Joy said, I think if I understood correctly, I think one of the best things about what can happen from a collaboration, whether it's with another composer or a filmmaking team or what have you, is that, at least for me, I invariably always find that, my first pass might be whatever, it's okay, but it's always because of their input. It always gets better. And I always think, oh yeah, actually that idea was actually really good. And I'm glad you said something, because now the other cue is better, and it just elevates the whole product. So I'm always very grateful for that, even though you always want to be able to say, like, I did the best idea right off the bat, and it's just like, it doesn't. Rarely does it work like that. At least for me, it always gets better once you have this dialogue. So it just seems kind of essential, I think, at least for working in any kind of music and media. I would also say, like, something that's, I think, helpful for me, and maybe this is more aspirational, but I think it's important too to understand to have your roles be clearly defined, whatever collaboration you're in. And to make sure, sometimes with me, I tend to just personally acquiesce and sort of, I'm sometimes too flexible, and that I sort of take a lot of ideas, and then at the end of the day, I sort of think, like, wait, what was my idea? I sort of like, so I think it's important to navigate all, bring in everybody's different ideas, but not let yours be lost in the background, so that they're all kind of have an equal seat at the table, if you will, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Just want to make sure you don't have puppet strings attached and you're just kind of executing maybe somebody else's, or you're in autopilot mode or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's go. I want to go around again, and we're talking about animation, and I want to know what everyone's favorite animated scores are, or maybe if you have top one or two, or that kind of pop into your head. For me, I know that's not an original score, but Fantasia was the first film I think that I've ever saw. Like my parents, it was like the first thing that ever put in front of my human eyes. And I think it explains a lot. I'm not a composer, but when I got into filmmaking, it was just like music was the driving point. That's what sent me to film school. It's what made me move out to LA and all that. But so Fantasia for me is just like the top of motion and music. And I mean, of course, there's no dialogue. It's just all motion and music and movement and music. So I'm curious if we go around, if you have any tops in your head that, Joy, if you want to kick us off.
I had my Fantasia moment with Lion King because that was my
Oh,
first
yeah?
movie
Yeah.
I ever seen. I was born that year, so like to me, it was like that was a movie that even now I think I will always go back to that score. But I absolutely love anything Joe Hisashi does.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
constantly so fascinated by the complexity of the emotions that he has in that score is so intricate, and I love that you can just feel differently every time you listen to his scores depending on which stage of your life you're at. So I think that's just really transcendent and beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I love revisiting things as you
Yeah.
gain more life experience and you go back and it's like, how do you react to it? Now it's like if you go through whatever, a breakup or a family death or something, and then you go back and, it's all
as you
all
mature,
there.
you
Yes.
bring,
As you grow,
it's
the
so
human
beautiful.
condition again.
Yes, for sure.
Michelino, how about you? Is there any animated scores that really stand out for you?
Well, actually, I'm going to go back in time. One of the greatest animation composers, Scott Bradley. I don't know if you guys know him. Made all the music, all the Looney Tunes.
Oh,
Yeah.
Such incredible. It's, and I adore that as a kid. I was, I think this is complex, but it's so great. And
So good.
I actually found some scores not so long ago. And it's incredible. It's incredible. But if you go more recently, one of the greats for me, at least, is like a Big Friendly Giant, John Williams score. It's an incredible sounding. So it's an amazing piece of art.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I mean his Tintin score is fantastic. I mean he knows.
Yeah. Yes.
So good. But I'm glad you brought up Looney Tunes because again, that really, I grew up watching a lot of the original Silly Symphony and Looney Tunes. Where there's no dialogue, Roadrunner, whether it's Tom and Jerry or just Chipmunks before they were Rescue Rangers. Where it's just music and animation, and that's
So
the beauty
good.
of it. Yeah. And it started the term Mickey Mousing. I mean, you're Steamboat Willie and moving it forward, it's just like you're
With
mirroring
no
every little
technology,
motion.
no
Yeah.
technique, just writing the score.
Yeah, the timing to just hand drawn and writing, I can't even imagine. Like even now it's complicated, but it's like back then I can't have imagined. But Matt, take us to your favorites. What are some of your favorites?
It's very, very, very hard to choose. There's even the Pixar world alone, it's like, but I'm a sucker for when score and songwriting kind of do a dance. So I might have to go with Randy Newman. Just, the fact that he can write something like, When She Loved Me, and then drop that in the middle of a movie and then just keep scoring. And even when it's not, when it's, he's obviously a legendary songwriter in his own right. But even when it's not a song, I feel like his cues kind of have a sensibility where it's like, oh, is that a tune? Like if maybe it was a tune and they muted the lyrics and it worked as underscore, like I love that sensibility that he brings to his scoring. So
the shape of of everything, you feel it there, just the shape of it. Yeah, for sure. Philip, close us up. What are some of your favorites?
Matt, I have to so my son who's 5 has gone into an insane period of just loving the Cars movies, the Pixar Cars movies.
Oh yeah.
So I have a yet again another newfound appreciation for Randy Newman, because in listening to the soundtrack, I totally agree. It sounds like that's a tune, So anyway, I totally agree.
So good.
But Kai, I have to agree with you. I mean, Fantasia for me was seminal, both as a kid and then as a teenager. I saw it again, and it really, I think it was very influential in just my decision to be a composer, actually. But I'm a huge fan of the original Disney Jungle Book. And Triplets of Belleville. Actually, I thought it was a pretty.
That's a great one. Yeah,
that's an unusual movie and score, but just weirdly great.
So good. It's it's one of those rare. I always the fact that, Michelino, you worked on something that has a little bit more adult themes. I feel like animation is so underutilized for for adults. I mean, when you think of adult animation, you think of South Park or Family Guy, Simpsons, something like that. But just having this big emotions and telling real stories is very rare. And I love, like, Trickles of Belleville was, again, something that was so creative and unique in its time. I forget if it won the animated Oscar, I forget, but I know it was nominated for sure. I remember, but that's a great one. That's a great pick. So I know, we're talking about animation, but this animation and beyond is our panel. So is there any recent non-animated projects that you've worked on that you're particularly proud of, something that maybe, meant something to you, really creatively rewarding, and maybe an interesting key or theme that you worked on? So Joy, you want to kick us off? Anything outside animation that you've been working on?
I can think of something I'm working on currently, which is the live action TV series. I like it because it's like pushing me out of my comfort zone and trying to incorporate some contemporary pop beats into the score, which I'm not typically used to that. But I love it that it's like pushing me out of my comfort zone and doing that.
Sure,
so
yeah.
Hopefully I can talk about that sometime soon.
Yeah, I know. We got to respect NDAs.
Yes.
Anything that you can't share, please don't feel pressure to share anything. We all know how it goes. Michelino, how about you? Outside of animation, anything recently that particularly
maybe
stand out?
Yeah, maybe outside of film, because I do sometimes work also as just concert music. So
Sure, yes.
Just finished composing a commission for a Trumpet Concerto, one of the amazing trumpet players, and I spent some months to work on it, and just recently I hand over the score. It's always like, I hope he's gonna like it, but I like it. It's like a play field, a playground to try new things out, and as a pianist, I'm now finishing. Well, we're going to start recording soon an album, jazz, with my trio, with a string orchestra, and just have fun in the studio, do some great stuff, and then I have some live action films coming up. But now a little playground moment for myself.
Yeah, I mean, it must be so rewarding to not have to, you're not locked to a picture. You're not locked to. You can just musically tell a story or paint a picture, emotions. I mean, that must be so rewarding, I think, just as a composer, right?
Yeah, but it is when you have too much freedom, it's not good at all. Even so, you have to limit choices. So even if you do whatever you want to do, it's not a good way to start. And I'm trying to setting my limits for myself. I'm going to use this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to limit this, I'm going to do that. It's much more interesting and much more creative to work like that, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you need some very deadlines.
Challenges. It's a challenge.
Discipline.
Yeah.
Philip, how about you? Anything outside of the realm of animation?
Sure. I wrote a choral piece over the pandemic.
Oh wow.
I'd love, hopefully can get performed at some point, but I was looking through, I've written a couple choral pieces before, and as so many of us, we just I had extra time on my hands, and I thought I came across this poem by Dana Gioia called My Handsome Cousin, and it's basically about a dream that he had where his deceased cousin visits him and says, let me show you this house that I bought. And he takes him on a tour of all these rooms. And then at the end, he says, let me show you the house that you're going to get. And then the dream ends. But I was just very struck by the poem, and I decided to set it for choir, and that was that. And yeah, I think I like it, but of course, there's only so much you can imagine without real voices. So
yeah. Well, hopefully you can realize that. I think it'll be amazing to hear that performed.
Thank you.
Matt, how about you? What's in your world outside of animation? Anything you can share, talk about?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's working on a holiday movie at the moment. Timing's, right, because we're in August for a holiday release. But so similar to Joy, I'm not sure. I'm going to kind of table that. It is a sequel. It's a sequel to The Binge, which is a movie that I scored. So we're bringing that back holiday style. But I guess something I can talk about. I know a lot of boys talk here, but The Boys came out June,
Yeah.
and then finale in July. And Chris has been the composer since day one on that, and I've been with his team since day one. And then I was able to co-score 2 of the episodes from this most recent season, which is season 3, which was awesome. And so leading up to this season, there was a new element. I suppose I can just talk about this. I mean, it's introduced in episode 1. It's been out for a few months. It's called V24. I'll just leave it there. And we knew this is unique to season 3, and it needed its own theme. And so, Chris and I were, again, throwing ideas back and forth, and we came up with something that the showrunner loved, which was awesome. We had this kind of ace up our sleeve or in our pocket, one of those. But as we kind of looked at the arc of the season, we realized we couldn't launch it in all its glory until about episode 4. And so we're like, oh, we have this thing that we really love. Anyways, we ended up putting it at the end of there's a big recap at the beginning of the season, right? To remind you of all the major storylines coming into the season, about a minute and a half long. And the final 30 seconds just launches into this theme that we had prepped. And it just worked great. And again, the showrunner loved us implementing it there. And so it was, it's not a hugely thematic show, but it was really cool to actually we kind of put a little Easter egg there of, a score, that's just a recap, but actually that's the theme you're going to hear quite a bit, in the back half of the season. So I guess, in a weird way, maybe my favorite cue out of the season is the very, very first one, which also shows up as the first cue on the soundtrack that was just released.
Yeah, well, I mean, congrats. I mean, you have the
Congrats.
word of mouth and the reviews on the boys constantly being heralded as one of the best, dramas on TV, and
So good.
it's so
Thanks.
good. And I just your guys as a visual effects supervisor was over on the Corridor digital channel breaking down visual effects with the visual effects reacts guys. It was pretty cool too. So
Oh man, those guys,
the visual
that
effects on that
team,
show.
that team, I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
either.
we think we're under the gun on the score side, but man, they have a lot to do.
Yeah,
And
with the TV schedule.
at the highest quality too. So yeah, hats off to them.
Where nothing looks cheap or rushed. It's fantastic.
No, they do amazing work.
All right, so let's to wrap things up, back to animation. We'll go around again. I'm curious if you have any advice for composers pursuing work in this medium, or maximizing success on current projects. If you just have maybe like a one piece of advice, like a one sentence, one little blurb that you could say, like, how do you motivate the new talent coming into this industry, or people who are getting their feet in the door. So Michelino, why don't you start us off?
Well, I would say be reliable and be patient. I think it's very, very, very important. Don't push it. Just do what you do, and then things will come off.
Absolutely.
That's all I can say.
Great point. Matt, what about you?
I guess the one word that comes to mind is practice. You gotta, there's a bit of the 10,000 hours thing where you gotta write a lot of bad music first. Sorry, at least that was for me. I don't know about the rest of the composers on here, but
Absolutely.
Sure, yeah.
I guess I feel like there's just so much information out there, and there's so many great forums. And I feel like there's a lot of young composers like, great, I know how to score. And it's like, yeah, but have you actually implemented, have you started with a blank slate? Because that is a very hard thing. And if you're looking to get animation, rip some videos off. Don't do that. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Practice against some established stuff, and mute the just practice is my long-winded answer.
Yeah, Spitfire does their composing competition. I think they're doing it again right now, where they make a partnership with the studio and they get a scene. I think they did Westworld. I forget what the new show that they're using now, but yeah, that's a great opportunity for composers to. Yeah, that's it. Bridgerton. That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. But yeah, Joy, jump in. What's your piece of advice?
Just not be afraid to try something new or unusual. You're hired for this project to bring on your unique perspective. So just go wild, be creative. I think filmmakers love that if you bring a new perspective.
I think if you bring your own voice, people, you want people to invest in you, and not,
Yes.
see a lot of people that are just like, oh, I want to, be like Hans Zimmer, John Williams.
Right.
I'm like, those
Sound
already
like this
exist.
person.
They
Yeah.
already exist. You can't do that. They'll go to them. They do it better than anyone. So
Yes.
be true to yourself. I know people get stuck in temp tracks and having to do sound like sometimes, but if you can push through that and make it flourish with your own voice, it'll be rewarding for sure.
Absolutely.
Philip, why don't you close this out? What's a
Yeah,
piece of wisdom?
I agree with all of you guys. Completely 100% agree. I mean, not too much to add. Listen, follow your curiosity, because your curiosity will take you to your specific identity and your specific voice. I'd like to think. Maybe don't be afraid to explore colors too. To bring that back to my very first point, but everything everybody has said is spot on.
Absolutely. So thank you everybody for such an amazing panel. That's all the time we have for today, but thank you, Michelino, Joy, Matt,
Thank
Philip,
you.
for being here with us to discuss
Thank
your
all of
work
you.
and share all your perspective. And thanks to Impact 24 PR for putting this panel together and helping schedule everybody. And thank you all for watching. We have more videos in this series, so head to Film.Music.Media.com and check them out. Great. Thanks everyone.
Thanks
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you
Good to
all.
see you all. Bye.